Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Lauren O'Brien. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Science Interactive Group, and I am honored to be hosting our discussion today. Thank you for joining us for Beyond the Bench, What's the Latest Data Reveals about Online Learning and the Future of STEM. I'm excited that today we're going to have a chance to examine this topic from a few different vantage points: the broader landscape of online education, the specific dynamics within science labs, and the practical realities of implementing this in courses. This conversation is particularly timely. We know online enrollment continues to grow, institutions are expanding their STEM and allied health programs, and faculty are navigating increasing demands. At the same time, we're seeing shifts in student populations and evolving questions about how to maintain rigor while providing the flexibility that students need. I can imagine many of you are feeling these pressures in different ways at your own institutions. So we're going to launch a poll here asking what your top institutional challenge is right now. If you could take a moment to select the one that resonates most or share more about your top challenge in the chat, we would love to hear from you. Our panelists will be addressing many of these challenges today based on what the latest research tells us. We're going to hear from Quality Matters about the Chloe 10 report, which surveyed chief online learning officers across hundreds of institutions to understand where online education's headed. And then we're going to examine findings from the annual lab report, which gathered insights from thousands of students and educators specifically about their experiences in the lab. Finally, we're going to hear from an instructor who has decades of experience on how these insights relate to what she sees in her courses and how she's continuing to evolve those to meet the needs of today's students. We will have an opportunity for Q&A with our panelists at the end, so please go ahead and use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to share those at any time during the session. And before I turn things over to our first presenter, let's take a quick look at the results from our poll to see which challenges you're all struggling with most. It looks like a lot around AI, student preparedness and retention, academic integrity. So certainly topics we'll be covering today. Thanks for taking the time to share a little bit more about what you all are seeing. With that, I'm honored to introduce our first presenter. We're going to start today's presentation hearing from Dr. Bethany Simonich, the Vice President of Innovation and Research at Quality Matters, which is an educational nonprofit dedicated to ensuring online quality for all students. Previously, she's held roles in on-campus and online teaching, instructional design, faculty development, and also institutional administration for online learning. She's the co-director of the Changing Landscape of Online Education Survey Report, or CLOE for short, which represents perspectives of chief online learning officers across the country, and which I'm excited for everyone to hear more about today. Bethany, thanks so much for being here. I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Lauren. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. If you haven't yet had a chance to download the report, I put the link in the chat and I will put it there again later, but please do check out the CLOE report. So we are now in our 10th iteration of CLOE, and a lot of the data I'm going to be talking about today and referencing is from the CLOE 10 report. So you get the latest and greatest. All right, let's dive into some of the findings. And really what I wanted to do here is echo a lot of the things that were key findings in Science Interactive's report this year, because this is the third year in a row now that we are doing a collaborative webinar, and each and every year, I think those findings really mirror each other, which gives you greater strength in some of the takeaways that we're going to talk about. So one of their takeaways was enrollment trends, about continued student demand for online options and also rising enrollments. And I do want to make a point here of saying that a lot of institutions will survey students and say, what's your preference in terms of modality for attendance? And you'll have students saying, I still prefer face-to-face. But when we're looking at actual enrollments, what we see time and time again, especially in the past couple years, is students then are still choosing to enroll in those online options because they need that flexibility for their schedule. So let's dive into our first graph here from CLOE 10. Because it was the 10th issuance of the report, we tried to ask some questions that were repeats of questions that we'd asked in previous reports. And as Lauren mentioned, the CLOE report is unique in higher ed in that it surveys the perspectives of that senior most online learning leader. So these are the folks that really have their finger on the pulse of what's going on with online learning. So we asked about online learning interest across 3 different student groups: our traditional age undergraduates, adult undergraduates, and also graduate students. And this is a question that we first asked during that emergency remote learning period in the early days of the pandemic. So we first asked this in 2022 and said, comparing things to 2021, are you seeing increased interest? We asked it again this year, saying, comparing things to 2023, are you seeing increased interest? So what you see here is represented for our chief online learning officers that said either some increased or a lot of increased interest. So we collapsed those together, and you can see across all 3 student groups, not only are we seeing sustained interest, but that interest is growing, especially among our adult undergraduates. So I think this probably makes good intuitive sense to you all. Please feel free to chime in the chat if this is what you're seeing on your campus as well, that our students really need that flexibility. Some of them have had to maybe move locations or go home, but they're trying to fit their education around their very busy lives. And they are saying we need more online options. Let's go on to the next slide. So because of the sustained interest, we also had a little bit of a deeper focus on online programs this year. And we asked our senior online learning officers to make predictions for the next 3 years as to whether or not their institution intends to grow their online program portfolio. And as you can see here, overall, we're looking at a lot of expansion in online programs. When you break it down by sectors, you can see their public 4 years compared to private 4 years compared to our community colleges. Public 4 years expecting and predicting a lot more expansion than others, but we're going to get into maybe something that is really going to highlight community colleges. But by and large, the next 3 years, you're looking at a pretty big explosion in that online program market. Next slide, please. Now, here's where our community colleges are really taking the lead. So we asked about non-degree online programs and certificates. So you heard you saw in the poll question about different things related to allied health certificates. So there are a lot of non-degree options, I think, that are going to be materializing more and more for students. This was another question that we repeated. We first asked it back in 2019 in CLOE 3. And as you can see in that bottom line there, back in 2019, not a lot of investment happening at that time for non-degree options. Look at today, 65% of our COLO respondents said some or major investment in those non-degree options. So this includes micro-credentials, boot camps, stackable certificates, etc. So more and more, I think what you're seeing is institutional strategy really trying to follow that student interest and demand for flexible options. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of why we are expanding these programs, both degree and non-degree options, of course, enrollment is still the biggest driver, but this is another repeat of a question. We first asked it back in 2016 to 2017. Responding to student demand has greatly increased since the first time that we asked this. So I highlighted that result there in orange just to kind of draw your attention to it. 65% of our colos said we are primarily growing these program options because of student demand. So you're really seeing this impact of student preference and demand across the board. Next slide, please. Another thing that the Science Interactive report brought out is student preparedness. And a lot of times students aren't prepared either to be successful in labs and or to be successful as an online learner in an online lab. That really is, though, a key to success. And what we found in the CLOE report is we are not really holistically and robustly supporting our online learners maybe in the way that we need to. Next slide. So in this first slide, and this is a data point from, I believe it's CLOE 8, when we did ask a question specific to virtual labs, and we saw a great increase in adoption. So again, this follows that sustained interest by students for online options. A lot, even though we concentrated on programs this year, last year we did a deeper dive into courses. And of course, institutions are having online versions of their on-campus courses as well. And that has been greatly increasing. But specifically for virtual labs, again, to really ensure that flexibility in those options for students in their schedules. 62% of programs and departments says we're having this large increase in adoption for these online labs. Institution-wide, it was 5%. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of student support, though, even though we are increasing the number of virtual labs that we're offering, we are not necessarily ensuring that our students are going to be prepared for that. So we have seen actually a slight decrease in institutions offering any type of online specific student orientation. You can see this is a question that we've asked a couple times now. This is the third time that we asked this, and I really wanted to see that data trend, and I'm surprised that it's trending down. But the open-ended comments from our colos revealed that a lot of them seem to think that students are already well prepared to learn online. And I'm sure if you're already teaching online, you know that that is not always the case. So this might be an area that your institution can concentrate on, making sure that you have a good online specific orientation for students and that it's required for all students. Next slide, please. In terms of other support services, we did see some improvements from the first time that we asked about these discrete student support services for online learning. That was back in CHLOE 6. So CHLOE 6 is the orange dots and CHLOE 10 are the aqua colored dots. And you can see a lot of growth. I think a lot of colos really fulfilled their promises of saying we're going to do better with this. And yet, what I want to call your attention to are the two tutoring options that I have circled there in orange boxes. Because in terms of students really being successful, especially in those online courses like a virtual lab, they really do need access to tutoring for both math and writing, additional academic help. And what we're seeing there is a little bit of a stagnation. So not a lot of growth. Only about half of our institutions said, we have this tutoring support for our online learners. So again, that is something that's a great conversation to take back to your institution, making sure that you are at least academically supporting those online learners so that they could be successful. And of course, that's going to help with retention and completion as well. Next slide, please. Lastly, I wanted to talk about faculty support and training. This was yet another key takeaway from the Science Interactive report. Faculty are strained. They lack support online, not just on campus. Next slide, please. So faculty preparedness for online learning actually has stagnated. And go ahead and click and we'll see that first data point. There you go. So we asked this initially back in 2020. And again, that was during that remote learning period. And it was a little bit of a different question then. Were your faculty fully prepared for those challenges around moving to remote learning? 75% of our colo respondents at that time said, no, they are not fully prepared. We asked this question again this year, a little bit of a different way, but the same general premise. And I really expected that number to look better. Instead, it looked worse. And again, a lot of these open-ended comments from our colos are saying, well, we feel like the pandemic remote learning was one and done. We kind of stopped with the training. We made investments and then let it go. And it's sort of like it's in the rearview mirror, which doesn't quite make sense when you're looking at both sustained student interest in online learning and institutions telling us again and again, we're going to grow our online courses and our online programs. Faculty need to be prepared to teach those courses well, to design those courses well, and that goes hand in hand with student success, as well as, of course, faculty support. Next slide, please. In terms of breaking out that preparedness, we asked specifically about designing online courses, teaching online courses effectively, and then using the LMS for online learning. So our colos were able to say, my faculty are fully prepared to do this well, we're working to improve it, or we're not working to improve it, or we're wholly unprepared. So you can see in that bottom line, using the LMS for online learning, about half of our colos said, my faculty are fully prepared to use the LMS well. I'm not surprised that was the highest response here in terms of the data point, but I think we could also and should do a little bit better than about half of the institutions saying we're fully prepared. But when you look at teaching and design, it decreases from there. So only 45% said my faculty are prepared to teach these online courses effectively, and then look specifically at that designing online courses data point. only about a quarter of our colos said my faculty are prepared to design quality online courses. So this is a dual conversation of faculty support and student success. We need to do a good job in supporting our faculty to design these online courses, especially virtual labs, well, to teach them effectively so that our online learners can be really successful in that online classroom. Next slide, please. I also wanted to touch on AI as well. So this is something that was included in the Science Interactive report. And one of the key findings said, without clear policies around AI, confusion over acceptable use will persist. And that is definitely what we found from our COLO responses in the CLOE 10 report. So only about a quarter of our institutions have an institution-wide approach related to AI strategy and institution-wide policy. And what that means, when we dove into the open-ended comments where faculty were unsure how or if to include it in their courses, faculty are not using it to improve their design. In some cases, faculty lack support and training and knowledge about AI, so their policy is simply to forbid students from using it. Students are unsure how to use it in order to really aid their work. They may go into one class that has one policy, another class has no policy, and then another class says you can't use it at all. So there is a lot of confusion around AI and the use of AI that really is, I think, hampering student success. I think we do need to better support our faculty in coming up with policies that are a right fit for their course, have some institution-wide guidelines, and also really do some student support and training on this as well. So that wraps up my section, and I do want to leave you with this. QM does have a free, it's publicly available Bridge to Quality Design Guide, and this really takes you step by step through the design process. So if you're somebody that's teaching online and you're thinking, I'd like to look at my online courses, maybe see if there's something I could do with the design to improve it, to help students and to help your own workload, please do check out this design guide. It will walk you step by step, and it really has a nice deep focus on connecting with your students and engaging them as well.
Thank you, Bethany, for those insights from Chloe. It's always great to see how these trends shift from year to year. It seems like this year's report really highlighted institutions are making major investments in online programs and also grappling with faculty readiness and support.
Yes.
Donna and Kate, I'm curious, from your vantage points, what do you wish institutional leaders understood better about what it takes to deliver those labs, and maybe what level of support is really needed for faculty to be able to do that effectively?
Yeah, for sure. As an instructor teaching online, what the data was showing that faculty support is so important. We need training, we need technology to support us, training in how to design really good courses online for student success, and also for our leadership to realize the time it takes to design a really good online course, versus just putting a course together and throwing it out there. There's a lot more to making it an interactive course, making the students feel part of an actual course, more face-to-face course, and also just making it so that you're giving them good feedback, that we're involved with them. And so that's a lot of work, designing it to then analyzing and assessing all their work each week and giving them some personalized work. That's one thing we do now at our school is you have to talk to each of your online students, kind of talk to them being online. And that differs from an in-person class where you're talking to a whole class, because most of our online classes are asynchronous. So definitely just the support with the training and technology, and also just understanding what it takes to teach a good quality online course. And then also what the data was showing, supporting the students, because I think we have this belief that these students understand all this technology and how to use it. But I find with so many of my students, especially my older adult students coming back, they're not comfortable with this technology. And so we're kind of throwing them into these online classes saying they know how to use this, they know how to do it. I saw one of the chats was, we think it's done, they know how to use it all, but they really don't. And so never mind they're struggling with the material and learning it and keeping up, they're struggling with the technology. So I think definitely support for the faculty, understanding for the faculty, and then support for the students would be really important.
Donna, you bring up such great points there. And one thing I want to highlight is that I recall coming out of the pandemic, we all really sort of took a step back, seeing the very quick pivot that there's a very big difference between emergency online education and quality course development for an online for online learning. And I think to that point, and to a great point brought up by Maureen in the chat, many of the institutional leaders may have taken a step back and sort of, as the years have ensued, have come so accustomed to, we were online, we did online during the pandemic, we're online now, that they don't recognize the steps that go into really building that quality course. It's a done deal, that there's not as much need for that monitoring and improvement. So I think you bring up a lot of great points there. Maureen, you brought up some great points in the chat as well, and I wanted to make sure everyone heard those. But really, from where we were 6 years ago, it's easy to become complacent, and we shouldn't be becoming complacent when we really consider the quality that needs to go into an online course.
Thank you both for sharing those perspectives and for everybody jumping into the chat. That really helps enrich the discussion today. So please continue to do so. Now we're going to take a look more closely at what's happening in STEM labs. And to do that, I'm honored to introduce Dr. Caitlin Rennie-Jancey, who serves as the Chief Academic Officer at Science Interactive. In her 10 years here, she's focused on bringing college students rigorous, high quality, and accessible hands-on learning experiences, no matter where they're learning from. Kate's an alumna of Marist College, where she received her Bachelor's of Science in Biochemistry, and the University of Iowa, where she received her PhD in Pharmacology. She's also one of the lead researchers behind the annual lab report that we're exploring. So Kate, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Lauren, and thank you everyone for joining us today. This is my favorite webinar of the year, so glad to have you with us. So I'm really excited to bring you into this year's lab report. As Lauren mentioned, this is an annual report. This is our third year putting it together. But before we dive into any of the data, let's talk about who participated in the lab report. Each year, we strive to bring together a collection of students, instructors, as well as institution admins to participate in the lab report. On the student side this year, we had just over 2,300 participants, and just over 50% were science majors. I think this is the first year that science majors were the predominant group taking the survey. Amongst our students, 88% had taken at least one online lab course in the last year. And among those, the top 3 disciplines represented were chemistry, biology, and anatomy and physiology courses. When we take a look at our nearly 400 instructors and admins who participated, we had roughly 44% being adjuncts and tenured instructors, 23% full-time instructors non-tenured, and then of course 30% being deans and department chairs. And amongst our instructors, we had a slightly higher group from our community and technical colleges with a 60-40 split when we look at four-year institutions. So let's dive into the data and take a look at where our students are today. And I really like this headline: students have already chosen the future, because it really is students that are driving this move in the shift online. When we look at enrollments for online lab courses, our STEM leaders are seeing continued growth in enrollments for online options. 75% of the leaders we spoke with have seen increases in online enrollment, and half have seen flat or declining campus enrollments. And I bring this up every year because it remains consistent every year. It is not a preference. Certainly there is a subset of students who just don't want to roll out of bed at 8 a.m. and trek across the campus to go to a lab. The students who are looking for online lab options need to have those options available to them and are choosing these options before they enroll. 80% of the students we surveyed who'd taken an online lab course had chosen the modality of the course before they'd selected the institution they were going to attend. So that piece, that online requirement, is in their head before they even start their school selection. And amongst the students, 90% said it was critical to have an online option for their lab for them to enroll. This included non-traditional students who are working full-time, but it also included traditional students who had conflicts in their schedules. They were trying to take 2 or 3 courses at once and would have had to delay taking that lab course an additional semester if they hadn't had an online option. When we consider growth, there were 3 primary areas where we saw increases in student enrollment. Science majors is a big one. When we first started the survey, many of the courses that we were looking at were science non-majors. We continue to see more and more majors-based science courses moving to online modality. Additionally, dual enrollment students who are taking both high school and college courses at the same time, and allied health students are a significant driver. And I want to dive in a little bit into our allied health students because they do represent many of our non-traditional students. So when we look at the allied health market, as many of you likely know, we are going to be experiencing shortages in that workforce, both due to our aging population, as well as just an overall lack of allied health professionals in the industry, whether due to retirements, burnout, et cetera. We see healthcare jobs growing at double the rate of other sectors. And not surprisingly, our institutions are seeing growth in these programs, in these programs. Of the institutions we spoke with, 82% reported growth in their pre-health enrollments, and 63% of these institutions plan to expand their allied health programs. The challenge with this is that our allied health students represent a non-traditional profile. For these students, they're working full-time, nearly 3/4 of them were. They have dependents, they're undergoing a career change, are working a career at the same time. And so they need atypical hours, evening, weekend lab hours to be able to take these courses. For these students, online options are often the best option for them because many schools don't offer those non-traditional hours for their lab courses. So let's take a look at where our campuses are in response to this growth in online and allied health enrollments. So when we look both online and on campus, we see some very, very consistent breaking points that our faculty are facing. First is student preparedness. When we spoke to our instructors, the number one problem, both online and on campus, is a lack of student preparedness for entering the laboratory. This includes students not knowing safety procedures, what common lab equipment is, how to use it, not doing the pre-work to prepare for the lab. We've got students who maybe haven't been in a lab for 20 years. We have many students who now weren't in the classroom during COVID and are now in college and trying to take lab courses. And it's all compounding into a group of students who need a lot of remediation before they can even begin the lab course on campus. And that's wasting time in that lab and taking away from that lab experience. We also know our faculty are buried in the logistics of setting up their lab. Nearly 70% of our instructors we spoke to are serving not only as instructors, but as the procurement people for their lab, having to go out, purchase supplies, identify what they're short on the week that they're getting ready for the lab. And 50% are doing all of the prep alone, from preparing the solution, setting up the lab bench, and making sure students have all of the PPE they need to perform the lab. On top of that, we all know that grading is a struggle. It's time intensive, particularly in the lab with lab reports, a lot of data crunching in there, and nearly 3/4 of our faculty struggle with the time spent grading. And when you take all of these pieces together, plus the lack of preparedness, the teaching really becomes a secondary to getting the students ready to be in the lab, whether that be from the preparation side for students or the preparation for working at the bench. Now, we've got all of these challenges already, but we want to scale our labs, and we can't scale without sacrificing. So we would love to grow our campus labs, but we can't. 55% of schools cite limited lab space. It's not easy to turn around and build a lab overnight. So we look to online. Our faculty are concerned about maintaining quality in their online lab course. 63% cite ensuring quality is a major challenge. And on top of that, there are many options out there. You've got hands-on labs, there's virtual labs, and those virtual labs on their own are often insufficient for an online course. And 83% of faculty cited that virtual labs only with the lack of hands-on experience are really a barrier for a lab course. And so what instructors where instructors wind up is that they're stuck between lowering their standards or limiting the growth of their science courses. So let's dive into each of these individually. So we'll start with student preparedness and how we can approach and manage that. So when we consider getting students prepped and ready for the lab, we dug into whether virtual or interactive pre-labs would support building student readiness. And we found in speaking to students, 91% of students felt that they would be more prepared to enter the lab if they had the opportunity to do a simulated trial experiment before they got in there. With the simulation, they would be able to go through, learn the safety protocols, walk through step by step what that campus lab would look like, so that when they arrive to lab, they have all of that background in their head. They know what they're doing, they know what their endpoints are going to be, and now they're ready to step in and work with the actual materials. Next, let's look at reclaiming some of that faculty time from prep. When we spoke to faculty, nearly 60% saw pre-assembled kits as a way to reclaim that time that they're spending on campus prepping for the lab. So by doing this, they can purchase or prepare a pre-assembled kit, build each of the labs individually so that when they're setting up for their students, the students just have to open a box, they grab everything out. There's no solution dilutions, there's no looking for beakers across 6 different classrooms. Everything is in one spot for the students to open up on the bench and be ready and set to go without any additional faculty time. And when we take these two together, there's really significant impact. The lab becomes active learning. It's not a remediation focus. Students feel more confident. They've had that practice before they enter in there. They know what they're supposed to be doing. The faculty member can focus on teaching, whether that be techniques or concepts. And then there's a more consistent preparation and equity between students in their performance when we take this approach. Moving on to scaling, we talked a little bit about maintaining rigor while also being able to allow more students to enter the lab. And so what we talked to our our STEM leaders and our faculty about was what is essential for a rigorous online science laboratory course. And when we spoke to our STEM leaders, 90% said that having a hands-on lab experience is essential to an online lab. And nearly 60% of schools who are offering an online lab require the students to do a hands-on experience. When it comes to our instructors, 80% of instructors teaching online lab courses incorporated a hands-on lab component to ensure the quality of their course. And 88% of the instructors said that doing a hands-on lab as a part of the online lab experience allowed students to gain the knowledge and skills they needed for subsequent courses. And one thing that is held consistent in every single year we've done this report, and what makes me very excited about that 88%, is that it's consistent between both non-major students and major students. So a non-major student may not necessarily be using these skills again, but they are ready moving out of that course to use the scientific method, use the skills that they've learned. But our major students are coming in back to the campus, maybe for higher level labs that can't be offered online, and they're able to take the skills they've learned in the online lab course and display them in their campus course and be successful moving forward in their degree program. So where do virtual labs fit in with this? What we see is that when we speak to students, they actually are looking for a mix of hands-on and virtual in their course. That's the most preferred method for an online science lab course. What we see is with the hands-on components, it provides students the opportunity to have a more comparable experience to their on-campus counterparts. It equips students with the real-world techniques that they're going to be needing as they move forward in their career. It also can help ensure that their course is transferable when they're moving on, whether from a 2-year to a 4-year program, from a 4-year program into a allied health program, but it helps support that transferability. Where the virtual labs can fit in here is to supplement the hands-on. So like I mentioned before, it's a low stakes environment. It can help the students practice those techniques at home before they ever attempt to do the experiment on their own. It also can fill in when we can't provide a student a lab with a hands-on experience, whether that be equipment that's too expensive, materials that are too hazardous. This is a place where we can use a virtual simulation to give students the experience with maybe using a piece of equipment that's millions of dollars, so they don't miss out on those skills. Now, we talked a little bit about AI, and we'll wrap up here. What is really the state of AI in this online science lab? So when we speak to our instructors, nearly 90% had observed the use of AI in their labs. And of course, I don't think this will surprise anyone, students and faculty had very different perspectives about how they were using the AI in their course. When we spoke to our faculty members, many of our faculty had seen students using AI to cheat, whether that be cheating directly on assessments or using it to draft their lab reports, not writing them from scratch. Although in some cases, we did have faculty members who saw students using AI to help review or study their content. On the flip side, students did not view themselves as cheating with AI. They viewed AI as a tool to help support their learning experience, whether they were using it to explain concepts they didn't understand, to help brainstorm how to write their lab report, generate study guides, prepare for exams and for quizzes. But what was most striking was that nearly 3/4 of both faculty and students had ethical concerns around the use of AI. Both groups worry that without sort of a rigorous or very clearly defined set of standards, that they may cross the line in their use of AI into something that would be cheating. And that was particularly striking from our students. And so how do we turn that AI from a threat to a teaching tool? Well, we have some things that are working now. We know that from our instructors we surveyed, roughly half were using AI to support their course design, and roughly half of our students view AI as a helpful learning support tool. And so what it really comes down to is how do we build the boundaries between acceptable and unacceptable AI use? So first off, as Bethany mentioned before, clearly defined terms, requirements, policies around AI use. That will help our students, or nearly 80% of students who are worried about cheating when they're using the AI piece. Additionally, you can't fake pipetting with AI. As a supplement to the doing online work, having students display in a video or in a synchronous call the techniques they're learning would help mitigate concerns that students are cheating their way through the class with AI. Channeling AI towards prep and not completion. Our students, we know nearly 70% are using it to help clarify concepts, prep study guides. The use of AI here is really to benefit students. And so really helping students understand how to use AI to help them study would be essential. And then, of course, assessing that process over product, focus on demonstrating and analyzing those unique data sets in the absence of AI. So I just want to quickly recap what we've gone through this afternoon from the lab report. First off, we know that online demand for science labs is up. 75% of institutions are reporting increased enrollment in their online lab courses, and the students are choosing that modality over the institution. And so as we move forward, we know there's a need to build robust online infrastructure that matches the on-campus rigor to help capture unmet demand, but also ensure that we can have the capacity to meet the demand for all of these enrollments in the science lab courses. We know that there's a preparedness gap for students. 90% of instructors say preparedness for students in the lab is the #1 challenge. What we know is that we can integrate those pre-labs to build foundational concepts, support practice, grow student confidence before they enter the lab. And we know that faculty workload is significant. Nearly 70% of instructors cite challenges with time spent on prep. Nearly 3/4 struggle with grading time. The fix here, streamlining our lab prep and automating routine grading to reclaim teaching time. And with that, I appreciate all of your time this afternoon, and I'll hand things back over to Lauren.
Kate, thank you so much for sharing those findings. The research really shows some interesting tensions between what institutions want to offer, what faculty can realistically support, and what students need. Bethany and Donna, from your perspectives, what strategies have you seen work to improve student preparedness, really support student success without adding a lot more to a faculty workload?
Yeah, I think that is a great question. I come at it from, it starts with the design, and I'm going to try to really quickly just tell some anecdotes because I used to, as an instructional designer, I worked across chemistry courses, physics, biology, a lot in health sciences. And what I found time and time again is the instructors, they just had a hard time envisioning how to support their online students in a similar way to their on-campus students. So I think that you really hit the nail on the head with that preparation meets practice slide where you're talking about pre-labs to build readiness and pre-assembled kits. I worked with a chemistry course and they had a very high DFW rates. And the instructor was like, I don't know what's going on. I feel like I'm teaching it well, and yet students are dropping out of this, and they're not dropping out of the on-campus section. We came to realize that there were all these opportunities for the on-campus students to practice and to do that pre-lab work. And the instructor just hadn't thought about how that could be done online. So we were able to do these really great interactive videos. Students had a chance to practice and really see how that process looked. All of a sudden, those DFW rates started to look a lot better. Similar story, another chemistry course. Students were dropping it right and left, and the feeling from the administrators was, well, this obviously then it can't be done online, and online is the problem. Turns out that the students that enrolled in the online section just needed a little bit more help with math, and they needed some remediation there. So we redesigned the course so that students were able to kind of assess those skills, and students were routed into personalized pathways so that we could provide extra materials, extra help, extra tutoring to get those students ready to succeed in that course. And that fixed the issue. So these are design issues. I worked with a physics course, same issue. Students were dropping out. It was because of the lack of a pre-assembled kit. So the instructor said, I need you to go gather this. It was like a bucket and all these other things that freshmen who were on campus didn't have access to transportation. They didn't really know how to get these things. They also were caught a little bit unawares about the extra cost rather than knowing the costs up front. So we added a pre-assembled kit. All of a sudden, again, the course was improved in terms of completion and retention. So part of it, I think, is really making sure that our online learners are supported in the same robust ways as our on-campus students. Also being very clear to them about what they're doing in the assessments and how to turn that in. And I'll put some resources in the chat that might help with that.
And I'll just follow up, Bethany, I fully agree. Utilizing the resources that are available to us with lab kits and simulations and such, I think is so important. And I know at my institution, there was a fear with that, and it was, you're now letting your class be auto-taught by this information. But I think in sciences, there's such great information available with these virtual labs that I want my students to use that. And then my time goes back to like responding to what they did and teaching the concept. So getting away from just the setup and the managing that and getting into explaining things and responding to my students, I think is really important. Making a nice, clean, concise course and making it work and flow, I think is so important because they don't have you in front of them telling them that. So I think the cleaner and more organized the class can be. I love introduction videos and orientation videos. I take a lot of the common questions I've gotten for years, online classes and in class, and kind of make videos so that it drops down a lot of questions from students because it's like, yep, you all have the same questions. And then I also really like getting my students working together because that's something that gets lost online. I saw one of the comments was about we lose that connection. And there were a couple of great comments on different sites to use. I'm going to check some of those out myself, but I use like discussion boards and Lucid to get the students kind of working together. So they're also helping each other learn, which again takes the load off me, but lets me kind of oversee it and then jump in, and add things and correct things. So great things that can be done to take the load off, but also give a quality class.
Thank you both for chiming in, sharing those. A lot of really great examples and resources for folks to think about. I'm excited now to shift to examine what this all looks like in practice and to introduce here our final speaker. Donna Uguccione is a dedicated science educator with over 20 years of experience in higher ed, research coordination, public outreach, and she currently serves as a biology instructor and STEM advisor at Cape Fear Community College in Wilmington, North Carolina. She holds a Bachelor's of Science and Master's of Science degree in biology and marine biology from UNC Wilmington, and is a certified Quality Matters instructor known for her innovative award-winning course design in anatomy and physiology and nutrition across multiple formats. Her diverse career spans community college instruction, aquamarine education, international research coordination, and she's a member of the Women Divers Hall of Fame, reflecting her deep commitment to student mentorship, STEM advising, ethical integration of technology, and lifelong dedication to science education. I think we're going to have to do an encore webinar, Donna, where you tell us more about that Women Divers Hall of Fame. Thank you for being with us today, and I'll turn it to you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate SI inviting me to do this. I appreciate all the hard work from Bethany and Caitlin with all that great data. What I love from the data is I don't feel alone. I feel like all of the things that I struggle with as a science instructor in the class and also in the online classes is represented by everybody. So it's nice to feel some of that continuity with everyone. So I'm just going to take a few of the big things that came out of the data and kind of just talk about how I'm dealing with those in my online class. I definitely am changing constantly. I think that's the landscape we teach in now. I am always looking to improve and looking at new technology, and technology is so great and changing so quickly. So I think as an educator, as a lifelong learner, it's kind of an exciting time. It's a little scary time because there's a lot changing quickly, but I'm trying to embrace it. So some of the things just from my classes, student preparedness obviously is a big thing. The data showed it. 90% instructors report challenges with this. Again, wonderful to hear that because I was like, yes, this is the major concern. These students are coming into class with no prior lab experience, both the seated classes and my online classes. We're getting the students coming out of COVID who didn't really have the in-class experience. I think we believe that our students all understand technology and these digital tools, but I think there are a lot of them who do not, especially my non-traditional older students. And so we throw them into these online classes without that knowledge. A lot of my younger students, time management and organization, knowing how to study, knowing how to take notes, they're missing that. And again, we're getting the group of students having come out of COVID who have lost kind of that ability, unfortunately. And then, especially in our classes, I teach anatomy and physiology, having that foundation in science. We don't have any prerequisites for our A&P 1. And so I have students who don't have a great background in general bio, general chemistry, and I'm trying to move into anatomy and physiology and trying to catch these students up. So I definitely do a few things, introduction videos, tutorial videos to orientate them to what the online class is going to look like, how they're going to do labs online. Again, taking some of those common questions I've had throughout the years and making videos to address those, really important. I have virtual office hours. I saw earlier another group has a virtual hour-long chat they do weekly. I think that's so important to be available to these students to ask the questions. They can come on as a group and kind of ask things. I also believe in them helping each other. So I set up a lot of discussion boards, especially with that intro material. I set up these discussion boards to say, how did you learn? Like in chapter 2, when we're learning about general chemistry, or chapter 3, general bio, what did you do? What techniques do you use? What websites? Because again, they're able to tell me what's out there, right? There's so much available and they can share with each other and also share with me. So I learn really cool stuff also. I do believe in some low stake pre-modules to kind of build them into it. So we're not just jumping them into the ones that are worth a lot of points. I think that really helps them. And then going back to that basic science, having to do a little bit with that to build up their knowledge and their confidence that they can actually succeed in this class. Next slide, please. I think another issue we have with these online classes is the connection, that community that we have in the classroom when we're sitting in science classes with labs and they're sitting at tables together and they get lab partners. So I really work hard to kind of foster some meaningful interactions with my students. So humanizing the course for sure. I do welcome videos. I do weekly check-ins with my students individually. I do weekly kind of brief little snippets of a chapter. So a little audio lecture or video lecture or some video I find just to give them some connection, some actual face to the class. I do personalized feedback on assignments. So some assignments are auto graded for time and such, but I do have one big assignment each week. It's usually discussion, where I will give feedback to each individual student on how they're doing, what they can do better. And so helping them progress throughout the course. And I'll keep going back to, I really believe in student-led discussion boards. I'm starting to build this using more things like Lucid as well, where they're doing collaborative mind maps and such. So anything to kind of get them working together, sharing ideas, I think will be great. I do love using collaborative tools. Like I said, Lucid's one of them, and I'm still just building this. Like I said, so much technology being available to us. I will say my school has gotten pretty good at acknowledging that online classes are growing and they're happening and we've got to embrace them, and how can we make really good ones. So they're giving us a lot of resources and a lot of training. So that is, I know not everyone has that, and I have to be very appreciative of my school. I do try to make labs relevant, and for our students, again, a lot of my students are allied health students, and this is time, and what are they getting out of this? So how is this foundation class going to benefit them in their allied health programs, in their careers? And and I'll bring up AI in a little bit, because AI has become such a big thing, and we do know students are using it to answer things, I do a lot with reflection prompts where I want them to bring themselves into it. So they might do a lab, and then I need them to say what went right, what went wrong with that lab, and then how that lab reflects their life. And so something that AI can't really do for you, the personal stuff. And as always, I try to give really good availability, so virtually being available. I also do offer open labs on campus for my seated classes that I always invite my online classes to join if they want. Next comment, please. And then obviously we're now going online. A big concern, I think, for most of us is, are we going to lose the rigor? And that was a big fear when I was asked to design online classes for A&P. I was so hesitant. I'm like, how am I going to make this like the seated class? Never mind just the material, but make it strong enough and rigorous enough to be worth it. So I do believe in utilizing the technology available to us, hands-on lab kits, these virtual labs. They're available, they're there. The data shows that students appreciate them. So I just think those are so important. And again, it's done for me. I don't have to reinvent the wheel, but now I can spend my time explaining hard concepts, explaining things that students don't understand. So it gets me back to being a teacher, an instructor, and not a designer or manipulator of information. Again, I believe in incorporating the material to real life and the course objectives, so the students see the importance of it, that it's just not busy work, that what they're doing actually has a purpose for this class and for their future. To help myself with timing, with grading, another thing that we spend a lot of time on and was a lot of work, I use rubrics to kind of standardize everything and make my life a little easier. And back to that, getting them to do the work, get active learning. When they do lab reports, they have to give information to that. So they have to interpret the data. They have to give me some personal reflections. A neat thing I've just started using are e-portfolios, where they're building material and they're putting stuff in. And again, then I'm able to kind of spend time reviewing it and grading it and giving them feedback. So next slide, please. The unique group, I do support this group quite frequently. This is my main group in my A&P classes and in my nutrition class, and they are unique. As it was mentioned, they are working, they have families, they have other classes, they might already be in the program. So being flexible for sure. My classes are all asynchronous. I know that's not always an option for everyone, but allowing them to self-pace, allowing submissions to be open for about a week so that they have the time to put into it when they need to. Again, staying with that relevance, the clinical relevance, the real life application, I think is so important. So again, they're learning techniques, interpreting vital signs and understanding lab results, and they're seeing the purpose and the importance of this class, not just busy work, because they're busy enough. And then incorporating team-based projects. Again, I'm trying to do more of that right now. I just kind of use discussion boards. I do hope to incorporate more, getting them working together on labs and such like that. And then skill development using AI. AI is here. It is unfortunately and fortunately what we are going to be working in. And so involving it, bringing it into the picture. And I think that goes to my next slide, where the future is. I definitely was an instructor who was like, oh, what is this AI? I don't want any part of it. And oh my God, my students are using it to cheat. I'm trying to take a new approach to that and realize that it is a new frontier. It is there and our students are using it and I'm now using it and finding it very useful for certain things. But I think it's really important. It was brought up what the students think they're using it for and what we think they're using it for. So making it a study companion, making it an additional resource for the students, not the thing that they rely on to do the work, I think is really important. And I think that's where I'm bringing in a lot of that reflection component so that even if they use it to generate something, they have to explain that about themselves and bring themselves into it. I saw from that one slide, definitely the guidelines for it. We don't really know. Our institution doesn't really know. We're all kind of learning. It's changing so fast. We're just trying to keep up. So I think having clear guidelines is really important and explaining to the students how I want them to use it. So letting them use it. Our school's really starting to embrace this, but a big thing that we got, and I just did an AI presentation or webinar, is that employees want students to have this. They want them to come into the jobs knowing about AI. So we need to teach those skills to the students, but we need to do it ethically. And again, have assignments that use AI, but then also give some personal reflection on it. And so I do things also with video explanations, with my asynchronous classes coming on, having a synchronous meeting to kind of get a question and explain it. So they're at least, if they're using it, they're having to learn from it, hopefully. And so just to end with, there's so much changing, you all know, in education right now, the way we teach, the way students are learning is changing quickly, but I also think it's a really exciting time. Like I said earlier, I'm a lifelong learner and I really love all this new technology that I can embrace and make my classes more active and dynamic and organized. So I appreciate your time. I saw there was a couple of questions. I'll try to answer those when I look at the chat, but if anyone has anything they want to ask me, I'd be happy to answer away. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Donna, for sharing those incredibly helpful tips from your experience, and Bethany and Kate for everything you've shared from the reports and data. We're just about at time, but I can tell folks are really excited and engaged and have shared a few questions. So we'll take just a quick one or two. And I know you guys have all been great about jumping in and responding to some of these in the chat as we go. One that came up from Ellen is she really likes the idea of virtual office hours and she's tried it, but students often don't show up. And so she's wondering if you guys have any tips or strategies of how you can really encourage students to embrace that resource.
For sure. I definitely know the a couple times I did it, or first day, they're all there and then they all drop off. You can make it an assignment. So you can make it so that you're going to give a grade for them participating and maybe coming on, like I've done, bring one question to the table and then I'll talk about it and then they'll get some credit for that. So anything I think that reflects a grade will get a little bit more participation.
And I would add to that anything that lowers the entry barrier to students attending those. So when I was teaching, I would have my first virtual office hours be about a big assignment that was coming up. And I would say, just show up. You can submit questions in advance. We're going to go over the assignment, take questions. Nobody would submit questions in advance, but I would submit questions in advance. I'd say, oh, we got a great question here, et cetera, because you know what students are going to ask about, you know what they get wrong. And that left them with the feeling that it's okay. This is what it's for, to ask questions. I would also give them a link to sign up for just a 15-minute chat with me, for, you know, for virtual. And a lot of times, honestly, online students need to be invited. Research tells us that they do not proactively reach out to their professors the same way that they do on campus, because on campus you have those low entry barrier times of before and after class, right? Online, they have to make a purposeful effort. It seems more formal. I used to have a lot of students say, well, I don't want to bother you. Like, this is my job. This is what I'm here for. So make it easy and make it an acceptable place to really ask questions and share confusions.
Thank you both. And thank you everyone for your time. I have a feeling we can keep this conversation going for at least another hour. I'd love to thank our outstanding presenters, Bethany, Kate, Donna. Thank you for such a great conversation. Thank you to our attendees for being so interactive, and for all of our veteran online educators out there for sharing your tips and ideas in the chat so everyone can benefit from them. As we close here, we're going to launch one final poll just so we can get your input on any follow-up resources that might be helpful for you, whether you're interested in more resources from Quality Matters or learning about their training programs and standards. You want to see more about some of the different lab kits and other options that are available. We're happy to help support those. And again, to everyone, thank you for your time, your questions, and your engagement. You'll receive a follow-up email with the recording and links to the reports that we discussed today, and some opportunities to connect with our team. So I hope you all enjoyed and have a wonderful rest of your day.